So let's share my screen since I still have not successfully fixed my. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm in there. There we go. Now we take you, and then we take you, and then
That's Rabbi Sachs, right?
that is the beginning. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Um, all right. So what I want to do is this. The presenter views for the icon comment. Okay. So we interrupted last week because we had a simcha. But the week before we were talking about the power of our words, and how the Almighty Himself used words to create the universe, how He used words to create humanity, how He breathed into us the power of speech, which separates us from the animals, that we can articulate uh, concepts, ideas, intangibles. You know, a dog can scratch at the door because he needs to go out, but that's not the same as discussing Kant, right? Um, and all these things are what define us as human. And so we talked about the power of words, and we don't tend to think about that much in our society, but words indeed are very powerful. They can be used to build up. They can be used to destroy. They can be used to heal someone. They can be used to hurt someone. And we can change the fabric of reality with our words, with vows. You know, if I were to say, uh, all Pepsi products are forbidden to me, and I take it as a vow using God's name, then that Pepsi is as trafe to me as a pork chop. I've changed the reality of the Pepsi product because it's no longer permissible to me. Our words are very, very powerful. So we were last time, just as a bit of a review, we talked about what distinguishes Judaism is that the emphasis that we put on the power of words, which is why prayer is so important in Judaism. When we pray, when we daven, it's not enough to think our prayers. We literally have to articulate them. Even if we're praying silently, we should be articulating the words with our mouth because we are creating words. And as Jonathan Sachs said, we are a religion of holy words. And that in Judaism, language itself is holy, and how we, such a beautiful idea, and how we use our language, actually, the language itself that we utilize is holy. When I was a undergraduate at Georgetown, in my enlightenment, I'd come to believe that there are some things in the world that are very, very evil that God disapproves of, and that there are things in the world that are very, very good that God approves of. But the vast majority of the things that human beings do are morally neutral. And that was my idea when I was 20. And as I lived more and more of life, I came to realize that that field of that was really morally neutral was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and that every single act that we do has moral overtones, has ethical implications, which is why to the farthest extreme, the Hasidim say that the way you tie your shoe in the morning matters because it could be a spiritual act. I'm not sure if I would go that far, but that the idea is that every act, every utterance that we make has moral weight. Is pregnant with moral implications, and nothing is truer than that, than the way we choose to use our words. So we talked about how our religion is a religion of sacred dialogue between us and God. It's language that allows the finite to connect with the infinite. So yes, exactly. So when my kids were little, and I was trying to teach them about brachot, blessings, and of course everybody at that time was into Harry Potter and Hogwarts. And so I use this as an analogy for them. And so what do the young wizards at Hogwarts do? Right? If you think about it, they cast a spell, right? And that spell always involves an incantation. They have to say something. It's a very Jewish idea, right? It's interesting to me that, as an aside, that there were some Christians that were very, very, very against the Harry Potter series. They saw it as very pagan, very anti-Christian. And I watched these movies and read the books with my children, and I thought there was very clear good and evil. And I really didn't see any problem with sharing these books with my kids. And but in any case, there's always an incantation. There's an utterance, right? And then from there is a change in reality. Okay, reality changes. So we would call that a bracha. We make a blessing. We utter an incantation, and it changes reality. The only difference between reality and fiction is that in fiction, you see the results of the incantation immediately, right? In reality, it can take weeks, months, years, decades, an entire lifetime to see the change in the reality that you manifested through making this blessing. In classic Jewish formulations, we have two types of brachot. One is a short form where we say Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, O God, Elokeinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, the King of the universe, and then we say whatever the ending of the blessing might be. But then we have another longer form which says, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to do this specific commandment." Okay. Both are valid. There are other forms of blessings too, which we won't go into. But help me see a distinction between saying a bracha and making an incantation to change reality. The only difference is how quickly it manifests. Okay? Our subject today is the power of blessings and curses. And the question that we're really asking ourselves is, do blessings have any power or portent? Do curses have any power or portent? I mean, that's really the question we're dealing with today. And and our discussion about the power of speech is the backdrop to that question. Obviously, I'm going to make the argument that if our words have power, then the blessings that we utter with our mouth and the curses that we utter also have power, right? God created the universe with an utterance. We don't have that. We cannot create, Genesis ex nihilo with our words. We don't have quite that power. But we do have, we're a chip off the old block. We were created in B'Tselem Elokim, right, in the image of God. And so we have some small part of that ability to change reality with our words. So bracha is the most basic form of Jewish prayer, and it is also the most ubiquitous. Open a siddur. There's blessings everywhere. Most of the prayer service on Saturday morning, or any morning for that matter, is probably about 50% from the book of Psalms. We read Psalms because they articulate the kinds of feelings that we should be having as we approach God in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening with our prayers and our petitions and pouring our hearts out to God. It's regrettable that we only meet on Shabbat mornings here, because during the week, the Amidah is full of opportunities to us to pour out our private thoughts and prayers and our worries to God. Worries about income, worries about, how my kids are turning out, whatever the things are that people think about all the time, worry about what's going on in Israel. There are parts of the Amidah that address all that. On Shabbat, we sort of set aside our personal concerns. The only thing that we really say is a prayer for those who are ill, because that cannot be pushed off. But we try to push off our own personal distress and stress on Shabbat. So the Amidah on Shabbat is really focused on the holiness and the nature of Shabbat. There's no opportunity there to pour our hearts out to God for our own supplications and petitions, really. But during the week, 6 days a week, that's exactly what prayer is all about, is taking the formal structures of the bracha that were written by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah 2,500 years ago, the men of the Great Assembly, the Sanhedrin of that time, the beginning of the Second Temple period, and infusing them with our own personal petitions. So, and a bracha is reflexive in the sense that if you make a blessing, you're blessing God or you're blessing the apple. Who benefits from that? What is changed by that? And the answer that I would say is both the blesser and the object of the blessing are changed. You're changed when you make a blessing because you're focusing on gratitude to God for the apple. You're hungry, the Pepsi, you're thirsty, whatever. But instead of just eating like out of a trough like a pig, we pause for a minute, say, thank you, God, for what I am about to eat. Or thank you, God. What an amazing, did you see the moonrise last night?
No,
It was absolutely breathtaking. You make a bracha.
Yeah.
You make a bracha. It's just, it was just, we stood we were driving up Scenic Highway on the way to Barry and Laurie's, and it had just come up over the horizon, and it was like a copper penny. It was absolutely stunning. Make a bracha. But that changes you in some way because you have that higher recognition. You don't just take it for granted, right?
There was something about the full moon that made it special. I was reading about it.
Yeah.
Red moon. Oh, red moon. Yeah, like you said, a copper.
Okay. So both the object of what one of the ideas of making hamotzi before we eat is that we are half animal and half angel. That's one way to look at human beings. We're unique creatures. We have a physical body with physical needs like an animal, but we're also angels in that we have a higher consciousness to do God's will, and we have the power of speech and all of those things. And so when we do something mundane like eating, animals eat, they're hungry, they stick their nose in the trough and they eat. But we take a simple crust of bread, thank God for it first, and satisfy our immediate hunger on a simple piece of bread before we go on to our meal. And that's something that distinguishes us from animals. It elevates us. It creates holiness in the world. There's a fascinating discussion in the Tractate of Brachot. There was a Kohen Gadol during the Roman period. His name was Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. He was the high priest of Israel. He said, I once entered to bring the incense into the inner chamber, meaning the Holy of Holies, which meant it must have been Yom Kippur. And there he saw God himself sitting on his throne, high and exalted. And God said to him, Yishmael, my son, bless me. What an encounter. Okay. Now,
Don't we do that in the Kaddish?
huh? We bless God all the time.
Yeah.
Right. But there was something, he didn't just make, he didn't make a bracha over, it was Yom Kippur. He wouldn't have made a bracha over food, but, he didn't just say, God bless you. Right. In fact, and that's the point. We have, the Talmud says we should make 100 blessings a day.
What do you think was meant by that request from the deity to Ishmael ben Elisha? What do you think was?
What do you think?
Oh, come on! I asked you first. I have my own reply. You know what?
God often, and we see this with Abraham, for example.
God has needs. And we're not supposed to say that.
Well, God isn't supposed to have, it's hard to say that God has needs, but God's.
He recognized, doesn't
Yeah.
he?
Yes. I mean, that's
Stop laughing.
On our level of understanding, God desires that people acknowledge him as a source of all good in the world. God lives independently of that need or that desire, but he created the universe, one idea is, so that people would come to learn to recognize that God is the font of all goodness in the universe. So yeah, what did he, and what was he doing? So to answer that question, he just, to Abraham too, he gives Abraham opportunities in his life through the form of these little tests, some larger than others, to bond with the Almighty. And here we have, in the context of the Roman control of Israel, a very holy man who God comes to. And of course, this story is apocryphal because we know that unlike in the first temple, there was no Ark of the Covenant in the second temple. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. And so the divine presence did not dwell in the second temple the way it did in the first temple. The immanence
So
of God was.
Spielberg was right. I mean, in that.
He's right about the fact that the ark is missing.
Yeah, that's right.
But he's not right that necessarily that where it is. Anyway, we make 100 brachas a day, and when I mention to people, they go, "Wow, that's a lot of brachot."
I mean, they're all done in the services. I mean, the
Exactly.
morning service, the afternoon service, and the evening.
Exactly. Morning prayers.
Yeah.
43. I'll challenge you to prove me right. In the afternoon prayers, there's 19.
Okay.
Right? Mincha Mariv, the evening prayers, there's 23.
Wow.
Nitila Yadayim, if you eat 3 times and you make what we used to call in Yiddish Negelwasser, where you wash your hands before you eat, 3 more blessings. Birkat HaMazon, grace after meal, times 3, that's 12 more blessings. You have, there's the Shema before bed, that's 1 blessing. You've got the bracha on the talit katan that you wear under your shirt, that's another blessing. You have a blessing for the big talit and the tefillin, that's 3 more blessings. Bottom line is you come to well over 100 without even trying hard. And on top of which, if you're in Shul Minyan and somebody repeats the Amidah and you say Amen, in the tractate of brachot, it says very clearly that if you say Amen to somebody's bracha, you get credit for that bracha as well. And that was really important because there were a lot of people that were illiterate and didn't know the brachot. And so if they responded Amen to a learned person's bracha, they got credit for it. One of the reasons that we repeat the Amidah is because there were no prayer books in ancient times, or very few, for the printing press, and people were not either they were illiterate or they were not conversant in prayers. So by repeating it, nobody had to be embarrassed about, I didn't know how to say this prayer. And we would repeat it for the benefit of everyone, and everyone would respond Amen to all the blessings, to us, to spare even one person embarrassment of not knowing it properly. So it's an act of great thoughtfulness. Yes.
Is there any other religion that spends so much time on not on the issue of not embarrassing somebody else besides you?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. In fact, so important is it? It's a biblical commandment not to embarrass somebody, particularly in public. And if you humiliate somebody in public, the Gemara says that the victims, all whatever sins he has in the books are wiped off.
That's beautiful.
And the one who's humiliating him, whatever good deeds he has in the books are wiped off.
We just read the story of Tamar.
Yes.
And she did not humiliate Judah.
Very, very good point. Absolutely correct. So we never want to humiliate. Again, how do we use our words? We never want to say anything that would humiliate somebody, even inadvertently. We have to think about the way we use our words very, very carefully. To the point where the Talmud says you shouldn't even call people nicknames. Not even bad ones like, hey, stupid or, whatever. But even just using, flattering nicknames should be discouraged because it often descends into the negative. You know what I mean? So, we don't call people carrot top or big ears or big nose you know what I'm saying, because it hurts somebody's feelings. Even if they say it doesn't bother me, guaranteed deep down, it does.
That's when it really bothers them.
That's right.
Say it doesn't.
That's right. Exactly. So coming back to Rabbi Yishmael, if God came to you and said, give me a blessing, what would you say?
Yeah.
What?
Thank you for not making me more crazy than I am.
Okay. That's a blessing about you. God wanted you to bless God.
I can't. He has everything. The only thing I have.
What do you think, Scott?
I mean, he doesn't need anything.
I see.
What do you give to a person that has everything?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to test you. What's the Latin word meaning of what you just said? There's a special. I'll bet you know it.
I might not. I haven't studied Latin since 9th grade.
No, I mean the word exists in English. Aseity, Aseity. I know you've seen it.
I'm not familiar with that one. I'm gonna look it up now.
To oneself, so I just read it, I read it a couple of years ago.
It's a good word.
Yes.
From asceticism. Yeah, it's probably related.
Probably that's the better.
All right, so I'll put you out of your misery. So you wouldn't just say, have a great day, God, right? What you would, this is what Rabbi Yishmael said in his wisdom. He said, may it be your will that your mercy conquer your anger, that your mercy overcome your other attributes, and that you act with your children, B'nai Yisrael, with mercy, and that you judge them mercifully and not strictly. And God nodded his head to Rabbi Yishmael to indicate that he was very pleased with that blessing. That God's attribute of mercy should always outweigh his attribute of strict justice. It's a beautiful answer, right?
But he always made room in his world for Shammai. He never kicked Shammai out.
No, I mean, Shammai, first of all, there's much to say on that, but we'll discuss Shammai and Hillel another time. But Shammai for sure is a very, very, very revered rabbi. So this is the idea of blessings. The blessings, I think, do have power, and they do have import in this world. We just don't always get to see the outcome of it. Now, we've been talking about blessings that we bless to God. What about the blessings that God blesses to the Jewish people? Very famously, God says, I'll bless those who bless you and curse the ones who curse you, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you. And he doubles down that blessing to Isaac, and he doubles it down again on to Jacob. Yes.
Do you know of any commentary anywhere that insists that the seed promised to Abraham is going to take two forms, not just one?
That
But the seed that God promised Abraham.
what would be the aside from physical progeny, what other
I see.
a philosophical seed?
Yeah.
Well, I think they're intertwined. That's the whole point of the Abrahamic mission.
Wow.
Is that to bring compassionate, ethical monotheism to the world. And all of those words are very important. Muslims are monotheists, but they're not compassionate, ethical monotheists. Do you understand? And that was the Abrahamic mission.
Based that on, by the way. I mean, I happen to agree with, but there's a specific reason.
In terms of,
Read the Koran.
well, yeah, I mean, it's very supersessionist, and it gives Muslims very, very wide discretion
But
to
there's an
commit
important
horrible acts
omission,
against infidels.
Specifically in the way they treat Abraham. Do either of you know what that omission is?
In the way they treat Abraham in the Quran?
Yeah.
What are you referring to?
Yeah. I don't, you can't find an account, even a reduced account of Abraham's argument with God.
Very interesting.
I mean, that is the whole.
That's his defining moment.
The whole dialectical side,
Yes.
the Jewish side, the argumentative side.
Right.
Yeah, they're not interested in that.
Right.
I mean, they're like the blood, the violence, and the sense of control.
Very interesting.
And what all
Submission.
well, yeah, I mean, I would say as women aren't so crazy about the issue of control. Men don't ask me, please.
Well, that's why Islam is so, that's why men want to become
Yes, yes.
Muslims, because they.
It's very attractive to men. Yeah.
Yeah, women.
You haven't got anything, buddy, but at least you got the right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to say about in terms of comparative religion between the way the Quran and Islam treats women, the way Judaism treats women, the way Christianity treats women, but again, I think that the take-home message here is that there's much more balance in Judaism,
Oh, yeah.
in terms of God's attribute of mercy and attribute of strict justice. By the way, on our tefillin, I think I mentioned this before. If you on the tefillin shel rosh, there's two long straps that you wear in the front.
Oh.
One is longer than the other, and the one represents the attribute of mercy. Yes. Anyway, coming back to our discussion, We have blessings that God grants to Abraham and his descendants. And we actually are fortunate enough to live in a time where we see the fulfillment of those blessings. God says, all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you, right? We represent 0.2% of the population of the planet Earth. 22% of all Nobel laureate prizes have gone to Jews. 22%. Okay? The gifts that the Jewish people have given humanity. And I'll spare you the litany of all the different things. We all are familiar with them. Everything from a ballpoint pen to Google, cell phone technology, CAT scans. It goes on and on and on.
But I guess there's a little aside to that, is that the guy that invented the periodic table, look at the first two syllables. of the
Mendeleev.
name.
Mendeleev, right?
Yeah, but I mean,
Not Mendeleev.
yes, it is Mendeleev. I mean, but I'm saying is that technically he was Orthodox. But if you look at his background, half of his family was Jewish.
Was it?
And he never got the Nobel Prize for it, even though his discovery came out 1859, because I think there were two guys on the committee. One of them happened to be a sponsor.
Wait a minute. The Nobel Prize didn't come around until 1901.
Yes, but
Oh, retroactively even.
he lived until 1906.
I see.
So there was all that time, I think when I think about great discoveries, the level of abstraction, I'm going into to have 8 this way and then to have the, I can't say, certain valences aren't good. Amazing. That's like 17 levels out of one head. Amazing. And the guy never got a Nobel Prize. Yeah.
I would also wonder how the Nobel Prize committee, what their attitude towards Jews is in the first place. And I think that might be questionable. And despite that, they won all those Nobel Prizes.
Yeah, I mean, Professor Auerbach from Israel won a Nobel Prize in economics about 10 years ago. A openly religious Jew. But I'm not that familiar with economics, but he had some amazing theory that changed the study of economics. And he did win one. But the point is that we, through the children of Israel, children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we have given gifts to the human race way out of proportion to our numbers. So that we see a manifestation of the blessing that God made to Abraham, that one day his children would bless all the nations of the world that bless us. So that was that. And so in closing on this section of the discussion, we come back to Sachs, and God created the natural universe with words, and we can create and sometimes destroy the social universe with words, unfortunately.
It happens every day. I mean, when you look at the news and how they try to stilt it one way or another, and it works. It gets people riled up. And it appears to me that it's pretty easy to use words in an evil or dishonest way. And people react. Words have power.
They do. And it's often, that power is very, very often misused.
Yeah.
Sometimes just the hint of impropriety can be as damning as the impropriety itself. I think Nixon was known for his use, I think it's called paralepsis, where he says, "I'm not going to comment on the allegations of my opponent that he's sleeping with his daughter."
Right.
It would be below me it would be degrading to mention that, so.
What is your most, of the same book that we know, what is your most favorite story in the treasury of Jewish folklore?
In Jewish folklore?
That book, by the.
That's not a small subject. I once had a book, I don't have it anymore. I think it's in Israel with my stuff there. It was a lovely book by Aronson about the Sephardic tales of Elijah the prophet. it was one of my, I just love that book. And the idea is that Elijah, the prophet, who is one of the few people in Tanakh that it doesn't say he died, like very definitively. He was gathered up to his people. And so throughout Jewish history, there's a whole body of folklore where he comes at moments of great Jewish distress to rescue someone or point us in the direction that we need to go. He's the invisible hand of God directing human events. It's a lovely, lovely collection of folklore.
No, I mean, the story that I was pointing to, and I know both of you will laugh, but you think, bunch of the silent,
About,
bunch of the silent.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with it. Is it in Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews?
Oh, no, it's in a treasury of Jewish folklore on page 607.
Oh, okay.
It's about this, I mean, it's about this man who never says anything. Oh, I know you have it here somewhere.
All right, don't spoil it.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
spoil it. I'd love to look at it.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think we've said enough about that, and we do have to weigh our words very, very carefully. It's a very, very important Jewish teaching, and as you say, it's done more in the breach. Really don't tend to think about how our words impact others, and that's very, very regrettable. So I want to show you a clip from a movie. We've talked about blessings. I want to talk about curses now. This is a clip from Moonstruck with Cher. And they're standing at JFK Airport watching a plane leave. I don't know if you remember this scene. Let's see if we can.
Was the night
You got to wait for the commercial, of course.
Except more on stress is
I'll just-
There's based on John Patrick Stanley.
Here's the clip.
I tell you when I get to London,
You made me very happy.
there's one thing about this wedding I want you to do. I want you to call, I want you to call this number. It's a business number. You ask for Ronnie, invite him to the wedding.
Okay, who is it?
It's my younger brother.
You have a brother?
We haven't spoken in 5 years. There was some bad blood. Now I want you to call him and invite him to the wedding. Will you do it?
Sure, sure.
It's She's on the way now. I gotta go.
Please go back, take it.
I'll tell you after.
Okay, here, I got you these gum and pork chops.
One opens your ears.
Yeah.
Choose. I gotta.
There's someone on that plane. Yeah, my friends. I told her on that plane. My sister was on that plane. But of course, on that plane, that it's gonna explode. Right on fire, fall into the sea. 50 years ago, she stole a man from me. Some crazy real woman. So then she tells me that she never loved him, and she took him to be strong on me. But she's gone back to Sicily, become in Sicilia. I used her at the Green Atlantic water. She swallowed him up. I don't believe in curses. Neither do I.
Isn't that adorable, Clem?
Gosh, I don't remember that.
You know, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, it always struck me as just very charming. Okay, so anyway, that's the clip. So look at that. There we go. So what about curses? We talked about blessings. What about curses? Right? No. Oh,
I mean, like, isn't it mostly venting?
sorry.
Is it mostly venting? Yeah.
No, this one.
I mean, when you curse somebody, you're.
Well, first of all, if our words have power to bless, then the converse should also be true, right? And if you speak intemperately, one of we have 2 tractates of the Talmud that deal with rash vows and oaths.
Right.
And the Talmud specifically says that hotheads, they are the ones that tend to people that fly off the handle and don't have good anger control. They're the ones that tend to make rash vows that they regret later, you know. say to somebody, I wish you were dead, or,
We're taken as very seriously.
Yes.
In the trial.
because our words have power. And so when you make an oath or a vow, you're doing something very, very, very serious. And so the whole discussion, half the discussion of the tractate of Nidarim is, how do we annul this rash vow that this person made? Rabbi Akiva says very famously, better to not ever take a vow than to make a vow and fill it. Okay, that's how serious it is.
Well, there are also laws specifically about women who make vows, whether they're valid after they get married.
Right. In other words, that's in Parshat Bahar and Bahar Bechukotai. Anyway, the point is, over there, what it's talking about is that you have to remember, in ancient society, women were a protected class. So if a woman lived in her father's house and ate off his table, right, and he supported her,
Yeah.
she has no right to make financial obligations on him. In other words, we would say today, if your daughter lives with you and you're supporting her, she does not have a right to take your credit card and go buy $15,000 worth of new furniture for the living room. She has no right to do that. So that vow is not valid, right? A widow or a widow, for example, that supports herself, her vows stand because she has financial responsibility for herself, right? Even the financial relationship between men and women, husbands and wives back then, was different. Women were supported by their husbands. Therefore, any money that they happened to make on the side went into the family pot, right? It wasn't, unless there's a special arrangement between her and her husband, that's money of her own. But again, can a wife unilaterally decide to go buy a suite of furniture without talking to her husband about it? He can nullify that only within 24 hours, by the way, if it's his wife. He's got 24 hours from the time he hears about it to nullify it. Okay? Otherwise, his silence is construed as assent. Right? Those are the rules. But again, the relationship between men and women, particularly the financial side of the relationship between husbands and wives, is different than it is today, I think. But certainly a dependent in the house cannot take a vow that commits the father financially without his consent. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about curses, and we're going to talk a little bit about meta history. And maybe you can buy into this if you like. You can don't buy into it if you like. But the Torah says in the book of Deuteronomy that the land of Israel, Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha Doresha Tatamid, the land of Israel is the land that Hashem, your God, inquires after constantly. And the verse goes on to say, Einei Hashem Elohecha, the eyes of Hashem, your God, are on it, the land of Israel, Merishit Hashana, from the beginning of the year, ad Acharit Shana, until the end of time, is how we would translate that. That God cares about all human beings in the entire world, but he has a special focus on the land of Israel. That's God's land. It has a special holiness that other places do not have. And we're going to see what happens when people trash talk God or the land of Israel or the temple, which was God's house. So, wrong way. Okay. So look at the Titanic. Okay. Thomas Andrews, the chief architect, said not even God himself could sink the Titanic. A chutzpah.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
What's interesting about Thomas Andrews is that he tragically died during the sinking of the Titanic. He was on board the maiden voyage, and we know what happened to the Titanic. It turns out God had some more powers than Thomas Andrews thought. So you want to call that divine retribution? You want to talk? You want to call it a curse for blaspheming God's power? I leave it to you. Yeah.
When you hear statements, and I know you have, you said, you react personally with irritation, though you may not show it. if you hear a statement like this, if God exists, how could he ever have permitted the Holocaust?
I don't think that's blasphemous.
Yeah, yes.
I don't find that blasphemous. How can you not ask that question? How can you not ask that question?
Um.
But
oh,
that's a dialogue with God.
No, but from my own point of view is that, I mean, I think that this is true, but perhaps you could, because this is an issue, but I mean, when I hear that, and okay, I think I'll have to use this word, but I think I'm talking to a stupid person. I have never heard a bright person make that a remark. Number one, historically, I think that percentage-wise, weren't more Jews killed during the Crusades
No,
than
not even close. There were not that many.
There were 100,000 Jews killed during the
Yeah.
Crusades.
and how many Jews were there in
As a percentage of the number of Jews, that's a different question. There were 200,000 Jews that were killed in the 1648, 1649 pogroms. But in terms of sheer numbers, the Holocaust and the destruction of of European Jewry absolutely
Is that
outstrips
the
all.
case? Well, okay, then.
But it's one thing to question God. You're not blaspheming God if you're dialoguing with God.
Sure.
You know, I think I mentioned this before. One of my favorite quotes of Woody Allen is that he says, "Some people will call me an atheist." He said, "But to God, I'm the loyal opposition." But the point is, he's still in dialogue with God. He's in dialogue with the God that he doubts exists,
I mean,
right?
this is a very personal thing, is that from my point of view, is that God isn't there to protect me physically. God is there to make sure that I behave properly. I mean,
You're there to make sure that you behave properly. Why is that God's job?
Oh, well, I mean, he's watching to see that I do.
Okay, that's a
He's
different
not
statement,
there
though.
To protect me physically.
In the context of the Holocaust, you mean?
Yeah.
That's a very complicated subject, but I think that
Alright,
in
okay.
general, I think that we have to make a distinction between questioning God and saying something like, my ship is superior. Even God could not sink my ship. Okay, that's a qualitative different statement. Okay, here's another one. The Lusitania, in the papers when she was launched, the new local newspaper said she was said to be more beautiful than Solomon's temple and big enough to hold all of his wives. Okay. And we know what happened to the Lusitania. Okay. Sunk by an Imperial German torpedo. Right. It was the precipitating cause of the United States getting involved in World War I.
Huh?
Right. 1916. Anyway, again, you don't trash talk
Actually,
God.
It was another Barbara Tuchman book, the Zimmerman Telegram.
Oh, that's a very famous incident. I've never read the version of it, but yeah. Take a look at this one. I'm sorry I borrowed this from Alamy. At the Synod of the Reformed Rabbis held in Frankfurt in 1845, Rabbi Samuel Holdheim rejected the idea of a personal Messiah and political redemption in the land of Israel. Early on in the Reform movement, the hope for national restoration in Israel contradicts our feeling for the fatherland, Holdheim said, and they called, you know what they called Berlin? The New Jerusalem.
There was no way of telling at that time. There was.
The New Jerusalem. This is a
Wasn't
picture.
there a debate, I mean, even in Israel, in Ben Yehuda's, circle, to make a German, the official language.
Yeah, they wanted to. Yeah. Well, that's because of that was because of Herzl.
Oh, yeah.
If you actually sit down and read the Judenstaat, he thought Jerusalem would be laid out like Austria with the Platzen, and that the Jewish politicians would come to the Knesset in morning coats and top hats like they did in Vienna. If he saw the way some of the Israeli MKs go up to the plenum to talk in sweatpants,
Yeah.
he's spinning in his grave. Uh,
John
what-
Fetterman, by the way, sorry.
What year was that?
and this one, it was taken around 1900,
Okay.
the 1901.
Late?
This photo of the Brandenburg Gate.
Oh,
right.
I mean, but the
And
statement
that's
was
when he
made
said
in the.
that.
The statements were made earlier.
Oh, yeah.
But then, of course, this is the Brandenburg Gate before World War II in the late 30s. And then this is the Brandenburg Gate in April of 1945. Right? You don't call Berlin the New Jerusalem. Right? Jerusalem is God's city. Another example is another clip that I'm going to show you from YouTube. You'll recognize the song
Waiting for your
probably
first
in the
day at
movie.
Camp Bow Wow.
By the way, it was Danny Aiello.
Yes, that's right.
So many new friends.
Actually, he said something very interesting about
Oh, yeah.
Moonstruck. He loved portraying his character in that movie. So it's the first movie about Italian families that isn't about the mafia.
Huh.
It was such a life-affirming movie about Italian culture in America that didn't involve the mob.
Yeah.
And it was very insightful thing to say. It's a delicious movie. I'm sure you.
I have to watch it again.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it, seen it in years.
As she stands there, she's resplendent, Cher. With her hair up and the perfect skin. Just anyway. You might have noticed I have a thing for brunettes with curly hairs. All right, let's watch this clip.
We romp and play, have fun with camp counselors.
All right. Close catch. This is the movie.
Carly's son?
Yes, from the movie Working Girl.
Oh.
The opening song is called "The New Jerusalem," referencing Manhattan.
Yeah.
This is also a lovely movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a nice Yiddish Mädel is singing this, right?
Yeah, but I mean, this has been done in our culture.
The lyrics are very very illuminating.
Speaking of lyrics, but no, me, I got to one day. Up with that.
All right. Anyway, I just
Did those feet,
say again.
you have to know this.
Say it.
And did those feet in ancient times. Walk up on England's mountains green.
It's very familiar to me.
And did the Holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? And did, the countenance divine shine forth upon these clouded hills? Here it goes. And was Jerusalem builded here amidst these dark satanic hills?
It's a Christian hymn, yeah.
It's William Blake and Charles Hubert Hastings Parry. Oh, okay, whatever. I mean, sorry.
I hear
Let's read it. And was Jerusalem builded here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and the second verse is even, give me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows up. This is, the orchestration is Edwin Elgar.
No, I think what you're saying is exactly on track.
So clouds unfold, give me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor let my sword sleep in my hand. We have built Jerusalem here in England's green and pleasant land. Oh my God.
Look at all of the Israeli place names in the United States.
And it's all due to the Puritans.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ephrata, all kinds of places like that. Jewish Dothan, Georgia. Okay, all these are place names that are taken right from the Bible because they really believed that this was the new promised land. right? And, obviously we see it differently. We see New York as the capital of Esau. And we see Jerusalem as the capital of the children of Jacob. One is a spiritual epicenter of the world. One is the financial epicenter of the world. And Esau was always all about the money,
Yeah.
which is ironic that the Al-Qaedanics had attacked the Twin Towers, which is the next slide,
Oh, yeah.
is that they saw New York as and the Twin Towers in particular, as a place where the Jewish cabal ruled the world.
My goodness.
And no, don't laugh. This is an established jihadi belief that the Jews were running the world from the Twin Towers.
You mentioned Chariots of Fire with that song. In that movie, Abrams,
Oh,
the
that's right,
Jew,
that's right, Abram was it?
is the Jew, and he is happy to run on the Sabbath, whereas the other guy, who's the Christian, won't run
On Sunday.
on Sunday.
That's right.
So they're holding up London as Jerusalem, and they're dumping on the Jew.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
Again, meta history, we
Sure.
start calling New York City the New Jerusalem, and God sends us a little warning in the form of 9/11. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that circulate in the dark web about how all the Jews got a secret phone call not to come into work that
Yeah,
day.
right.
Of course, it's all patent nonsense. A lot of Jewish people died that day. But the thing is, this is the sort of like the narrative that the Al-Qaedanics hold as to why they targeted those two buildings. Why not the Empire State Building? Why not the Chrysler Building?
This is the first, I'm glad you told me that, because I was always wondering, why Trade Center, what's that?
Yeah. And this is a very famous slide. A lot of people are familiar with it. These are all the civilizations and nations and empires that have tried to destroy the Jewish people. And let's be honest, do they really have, like, we're nobody. What are we Jews? We're a quarter of 1% of the world's population, not even. Their real fight is not with us, it's with the God that protects us. And so, all the different empires and nations, which is why we can say with a great deal of confidence that Iran is not a long-term threat to the Jewish people or to Israel. For some reason, I don't know why we don't say this on Saturday morning. Every morning, the culmination of the Pesukei de Zimra in a traditional siddur is the Song of the Sea that was said after the Red Sea parted and swallowed all the Egyptians and the Jews passed through on dry land. Az Yashir Moshe, thus sang Moses and the children of Israel. And it says in there, let me get a siddur so I can quote it accurately. Amar Aryeh, the enemy said,
Of the Jewish people that were still here.
Yes.
the enemy said, Erdof, I will chase them. I will overtake them. I will divide their plunder. I will satisfy my lust with them. I will unsheath my sword. My hand will impoverish them. But then what happened? Nashafta bruchacha kisamoyam. You blew with your wind, the sea enshrouded them, the mighty ones, the enemy sank like lead to the bottom of the ocean. And every time I say that every day, I think of the Iranians. They're not going to be around for very much longer. My concern is for the United States,
Yeah.
or less so since the election, but if the United States continued on the very anti-Israel, pro-Iranian path, it did not augur well for the United States, based on the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think we can close out this section now on the power of speech. I hope it was insightful. We're going to move on to other topics now, but I really can't emphasize it enough because it is absolutely a fundamental building block of understanding what Judaism is about, is how we use our words.
So true.
All right, next week, same time, same channel.
What's the
And,
topic for next week?
and people that use their words well are truly